Tony Blair has his bloody fingers in every pot. Everywhere there's rivers of blood flowing, Tony Blair was there. There's an old Irish proverb. If you see two neighbors fighting in the morning, you can be sure that Tony Blair had dinner with one of them last night.
I wrote an article on the assassination of Kirk and the strategy of tension, and that this was, if you think about what the strategy of tension is, it's been used in the past to have blind terror terrorize a population to clear the way for more authoritarian rule. But the fact that Netanyahu is certifiably insane is part of his power, because people are really clear that he might use nuclear weapons.
This whole clash between Islam and Christianity is purely an artifact of the imperial cabal, who just want to pit us to fight amongst each other while they impose their control matrix on all of us and impose a totalitarian rule.
Using Wi-Fi without NordVPN could mean sharing your private stuff with more people than you think. NordVPN. Online security starts with a click.
You can keep up with Alex Krainer's extraordinary analysis and writing at his Substack, and also make money using his trend-following strategy. To find out more, go to bit.ly/CryptoRichAlexK. bit.ly/CryptoRichAlexK. Keep up with Harley Schlanger's insightful analysis on macro politics at larouche.org. Link in the description below. Hey Harley, hey Alex, thank you so much, guys. Hello.
Hi, Rich. Very good to join you and Harley. It's Friday, so greetings to the audiences, and also good weekend to them. Hopefully, we're still going to be around by Monday.
Yes,
and I'm happy to see both of you.
Yes, and it is Friday. It's Friday the 3rd of October. I pressed the record button at 7:35 p.m. UK time, and fingers crossed I'll get this out some point on Saturday. And I'll have the links to you, Alex, your X profile, and your naked hedgy business, your trend following business, in the description below. And for you, Harley, the president of the LaRouche organization, both of you do really great analysis, and I'll have your links as well. And please share this video far and wide, subscribe, like, all that business. I really should say that more often. Okay, so what is going on in the world? What is going on in the world? I'm going to start this way. Alex, you recorded a video. I forget the name of the vlogger that you did. It was a great conversation. And you were talking about the peace plan, the 21-point peace plan. And you said this is a delaying tactic, the peace plan for Gaza. And I didn't quite understand. Could you say more about that? But also just a little bit of background as well to what that is. And then Harley will get your take, and then let the conversation and the ideas and the fabulous analysis flow.
Well, I suspect that it might be a delaying tactic. I don't know that as a fact, but the peace plan itself is so far-fetched, so unrealistic, that I had to stop and wonder, why are they doing this in the first place? Netanyahu hates it, right? Nobody asks Hamas about it, right? So it's just somebody's wish list, I guess, put in 21 points on a piece of paper. It's unacceptable to Hamas. It's almost certainly going to be unacceptable to the Arab leaders in the region. The Israelis are 100% going to reject it, even if they say that they're going to accept it, because this peace plan would be basically kryptonite to Netanyahu's coalition. So why do it in the first place? What is the point? And so I thought the best guess I could put forward is that the Trump administration put it in there as a delaying tactic, to give a bone to chew on for everybody. Maybe a couple of days or a couple of weeks of discussions and back and forth. And, the Israelis want these changes, and Hamas already said, they already made their suggestions. And then, various meetings and discussions with the Qataris, with the Saudis. And maybe some time goes by and Trump can figure out a way to avoid going to war with Iran, because that one's coming. And I don't, it will be bad for Iran, along with the risk that Israelis might use nuclear weapons. It will be fatal for Israelis, and it will be catastrophic for the United States. So it stands to reason that Trump would want to avoid getting enmeshed in that. But given that he is, his administration is apparently deeply infiltrated by Zionist interests, that he's apparently afraid of them, that between 70 and 80% of Congress is unconditionally loyal to Israel, and that there's this huge, very fanatical voting segment of Zionist Jews and Christian evangelicals. The pressure, if a big war erupts between Israel and Iran, the pressure for Trump and the United States to go in will be probably irresistible. It will be unbearable. So my guess, which is only a guess, I don't know this, my guess is that Trump just put together a way to gain time and to try to allow the situation to dissipate in some other way. And I think that the most likely outcome, if enough time passes, is that Israel itself is going to implode.
Okay. Harley?
Well, let's start with the 21-point plan. There's no enforcement mechanism. And I've been reading the Israeli press, and the pro-Netanyahu press says, well, basically, it's not going to happen. And the anti-Netanyahu press is saying that it's not going to happen. So you have lowered expectations from Israel. Now, you mentioned the relations with the Arabs. They're under enormous pressure now from the so-called Arab Street because nothing's been done. The attempt to use the United Nations General Assembly fell short. No one had the cojones to stand up and say, we've got to do something about Israel's presence in the UN. Actually, there were a couple of articles in Haaretz that said maybe Israel should be kicked out of the United Nations. So when you have that in Haaretz, one of the leading Israeli papers, but no one at the United Nations would propose that. The question of sanctions against Israel was brought up by a couple of people, but there was no real push for it. Now, the war with Iran is a very significant concern because that's ultimately what Netanyahu wants. And Hamas is sort of like the appetizer, but it's an appetizer that didn't go down easily. So Netanyahu is forced to do something for his coalition. So I think if it's a delaying tactic, it might be Netanyahu delaying anything more forceful coming from the global south and possibly Russia. Interestingly, Putin at the Valdai Club came out and said that this was a good development because it includes the two-state solution. So it doesn't look as though Russia or China are going to put any significant pressure on Netanyahu. Now, the other aspect to this is that Trump has been somewhat wobbly recently. And we saw this on Ukraine. On the one hand, people say, well, maybe he's just washing his hands of Ukraine and leaving it for Europe. On the other hand, the U.S. is talking about doing targeting, giving targeting capabilities to Ukraine to send long-range missiles into Moscow.
Harley, forgive me, before we just get into Ukraine, because I do want to talk about Ukraine. We will come to that. I want to stick with Gaza and Israel.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah?
Well,
go on.
Just Alex's point about the Zionists in the United States is really the issue that's unresolved. Trump just gave a great present to Netanyahu by letting TikTok be taken over by Larry Ellison from Oracle. Now they're talking about doing something with X, with Musk's website, web address. What I was told, and I was told this by several different people, Trump's meeting with King Charles had an impact on him, and that Charles was pushing him for resolving the situation in Gaza. And so Trump decided to do the Trumpian thing, come up with a grandiose plan. It's not clear how it'll work. It's very undefined. And in that sense, Alex, I think you're right. It is sort of a delaying tactic to avoid making the hard decisions, because this won't stop the killing. It's not going to stop the annexation of the West Bank, the attempt to create facts on the ground so there can't be a two-state solution. Netanyahu said he will never accept a two-state solution. So I think we're still a long way from a resolution. And it worries me that Tony Blair is in the middle of it.
Yeah, worries me too. Okay, the weekend before Trump got inaugurated, Witkoff flew to Tel Aviv, had Netanyahu meet him on the Sabbath, had Netanyahu sign this ceasefire agreement. So Trump, why can't he just stop the killing? What's happened that he can't do that when he did that before?
Well, I'll just say I think it's the Zionist lobby and the impact of that. But Trump is now feeling another contrary pressure, namely the reports coming out around the whole Charlie Kirk issue that young Republicans, young conservatives are turning against Israel and against Netanyahu. And this is from Tucker Carlson, a number of the commentators, Candace Owens and others. And Trump is feeling the pressure. I mean, it's now over 50% of young conservatives, 18 to 30. Actually, the figure I saw most recently in the Quinnipiac poll was 60% oppose any more aid to Israel. The American First idea, why take care of Israel before the United States, is having an impact on the Trump base. So I think Trump feels compelled to do something, but he's really up against a hard wall with the Zionist lobby. And the other question there is the 2026 midterm elections. If there's something disastrous that happens in the Middle East, what will happen to the Republicans? Maybe that would revive the Democrats, although the Democrats don't seem to have a clue of what to do.
Okay, Alex?
I just find it, yeah, I agree with Harley. It feels as though something about Trump changed after his visit to the UK, and I don't know what that is. I read some people who were saying that he's been threatened, that not that he might be assassinated, but they might take it out on members of his family, his children and his grandchildren, and that this is the reason why he's afraid of them. And a lot of things about Trump can be explained, or at least you can conceive of alternative explanations for certain policy moves. But I don't have an explanation, for example, and I think this is close enough to Gaza that you're going to let me finish the thought. Why all of a sudden he wants the Bagram base? Because this has exactly zero to do with US interests, but it is part of the British obsession with ruling the Eurasian landmass. For them, since the Mackinders times, Afghanistan has been pivotal, very, very important strategic point to control. And so after meeting with Charles and with Keir Starmer, suddenly he wants the Bagram base back. He was the one who wanted to get out of Afghanistan already in 2017. So what changed that suddenly he wants Bagram Air Base back, which cannot be had without a major trouble? They've been trying to pacify the Taliban for 20 years, and they haven't succeeded, right? They were defeated by the Taliban. And so now you're going to go back and just take that base, and you think the Taliban are going to say like, oh, okay, you can have that. It's not going to happen like that. And so I don't quite have an explanation for that, but a lot of revelations that have happened in the aftermath of that visit, and particularly in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk assassination, is that this whole big monster, the Zionist project and the Ukraine project and the big tech, Larry Ellison, Ukraine,
Peter
Thiel, City of London. It's all kind of converging on the City of London, because then Larry Ellison has a long-standing relationship with Tony Blair, and as we've discussed before, Tony Blair has his bloody fingers in every pot. Everywhere there's rivers of blood flowing, Tony Blair was there. You know that there's an old Irish proverb if you see two neighbors fighting in the morning, you can be sure that Tony Blair had dinner with one of them last night.
Well, you brought up a couple of things there, Alex, that I think are important. I wouldn't underestimate the sense of concern over the possibility of an assassination of Trump, that he and people in his entourage are concerned about that. They don't see the Secret Service as totally reliable. They're not sure about the FBI. And, there is a reality there. I wrote an article on the assassination of Kirk and the strategy of tension. And that this was, if you think about what the strategy of tension is, it's been used in the past to have blind terror terrorize a population to clear the way for more authoritarian rule. And we're definitely seeing that. So that's one aspect. Secondly, you mentioned the tech sector, the consolidation of the British American tech sector, which was so visible at the banquet that King Charles put on, where you had Microsoft, you had Google, you had Peter Thiel was there, Alex Karp was there from Palantir, and they pledged $42 billion in contracts for British companies out of a bigger package of $250 billion. So don't underestimate the effect of the money flowing through these tech contracts and the integration of the tech sector, Silicon Valley especially, with the military. The third point I raised, and this is partly related to the strategy of tension, is and Eurasia, which you correctly identified as what the real target is now. There was the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting with Modi joining hands with President Xi and President Putin, and talking about establishing a SCO development bank, pulling the whole global south away from the IMF, and so on. This was not unnoticed in London and Wall Street, because the idea of the riches of the Arctic, Siberia, the Eurasian markets, they're seeing that disappear. And under those circumstances, what's Trump going to do about it? He's putting forward Bitcoin as a way to resolve, and tariffs. And a lot of people are nervous about that. They don't see that as a competent economic policy. So the question that was posed behind the scenes, I'm sure, with Starmer, King Charles, and the relevant figures, was how do we put an end to the threat from the global south? And one final point there, the unmasking of Peter Mandelson, which was a bit of a blow to the British, but it was really a blow at Trump because of the whole Epstein question. So you've got all these different factors coming together. And I just think Trump doesn't have the set of principles and firmness in those principles to stick to the course. And he gets distracted. And that's been a problem.
I wanted to just follow up with the Jeffrey Epstein question, because I was very puzzled about this whole thing, and I thought that's not something that's going to go public. But I never thought that the reason for that was that Trump himself is compromised, because I figured, they really did try absolutely everything to destroy him and to prevent him from running for office. So if there was something compromising in those files, they would have played that card. There's no reason why they wouldn't. If they stayed in power, they would have been safe. So they could play that without smearing themselves with the same poison. And now I realize that the reason probably why Trump and Patel and all these people in the Trump administration are pretending that the Epstein file doesn't exist and they have no evidence that Epstein trafficked anybody to anyone to anyone. The reason is probably because it actually leads back to Israel and the Mossad, because we know from Epstein's first trial and non-prosecution agreement that the prosecutor there said that we don't, he said that I was told that he was linked to intelligence, so to lay off of him. Well, which intelligence? And so now if we if we look at the most recent developments and the revelations from Charlie Kirk assassination, we can take a pretty good guess which intelligence that is. And if Max Blumenthal's revelations that Trump is actually afraid of the Israelis and the Zionists in his environment, that is the reason why they somebody said, you make this public, you die, or your children die, or your grandchildren die, or something bad's going to happen. And I think that this is why they hushed up the Epstein files. And then, another revelation from that whole thing is that apparently the FBI is not being transparent with the administration. That is, members of administration have requested repeatedly to view certain video footage related to Charlie Kirk assassination, and they couldn't get it. FBI has them, didn't want to share it with the administration. So there's a problem between the Trump cabinet and Kash Patel, and Kash Patel is on record saying that his highest priority is Israel, to protect and defend Israel. I don't know if that's out of conviction. He's Indian, so maybe, or if he himself is somehow compromised or threatened and blackmailed to make sure that nothing bad ever happens to Israel on his watch.
Isn't his partner, she has Israeli connections?
Yeah, apparently, and there's a suspicion that she's a honeypot trap.
Well, if you think about it, all these things show an interconnection of intelligence, of organized crime, of finance, and then throw in the sex, which catches people's attention. But I have a slightly different view of it. I think that if you really unravel the Epstein case, what you're going to find is the connection between Israeli intelligence and the Meyer-Lansky organized crime network in the United States. And people shouldn't underestimate the Meyer-Lansky crime network. Through its work with Michael Milken and Drexel Burnham and junk bonds and so on, they were handling tens of billions of dollars that was being laundered in a way at a time when even the Federal Reserve wasn't able to produce enough cash to bail out firms. And people who had ties to the Lansky network got bailed out. Now, Lansky had very sharp ties with Israel. So did Robert Maxwell. So you look at these things, and what you see is an interconnection of networks that are not exactly gentlemen, who have a lot of power and can rig things. Like, how did Larry Ellison and Oracle get TikTok? Just all of a sudden it happened. And Ellison is a top-level operative with Netanyahu, and he got the deal. And he said explicitly, it's because young people are being influenced by anti-Semitic coverage on TikTok, and that's going to stop. So there's a thug operation here, a not pretty one, but has enough to put the fear of God in a lot of people. And then you add the fact that Charlie Kirk was shot right out in the open, and the story doesn't quite come together, the official story, but people are afraid to challenge it, except for Max Blumenthal.
We are.
And the three of us.
Yeah.
It's just the four of us, really. Oh yeah, Candace Owens. Yeah. Okay, five of us.
We are ruled by thugs.
Yeah, but then there's another thing that's not so easy to explain. How could Netanyahu have so much power? He's a very, very highly compromised politician sitting on very thin ice in his position as a prime minister of Israel. How could he possibly have that much power?
But it's not Netanyahu who has the power. I still see Netanyahu as an operative of the City of London.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe once or twice removed, but you're still dealing with the effects of the Balfour Declaration, of the British mandate in Palestine, the buildup of the Israeli military, the nuclear capability, and so on. But the fact that Netanyahu is certifiably insane is part of his power, because people are really clear that he might use nuclear weapons. I don't think Trump would. I don't think Putin would. I don't know if Starmer would. but Netanyahu seems to be the type who would. And I think those people who want to save humanity are legitimately concerned about him. And then you look behind him at Ben Gvir and Smotrich and the whole gang. It's frightening.
Correct.
Indeed.
Okay, I wanna pursue this same rabbit hole. How can the City of London have that much power? Because they too are, what is Great Britain today? It's a third-rate military power. Has almost no navy, has almost no army. Their economy is a disaster, and their finances are in a completely catastrophic state. How do they still wield so much disproportionate power in the world? And all of these things that they do, buying TikTok. I think that Larry Ellison spent a total of $7 billion buying media companies, because it's not just TikTok. He bought CBS and he bought a whole bunch of those Nickelodeon and I can't even name the names, but there's like a whole laundry list of media companies that he bought. Spent $7 billion. Well, how can he do that? And where does all that money come from? And it only hit me in the last few weeks that it's the whole Eurodollar market. And Eurodollar market has been under the control of the City of London practically since the get-go. And these are US dollars which are in circulation outside of the United States, even though they are nominally US dollars. And the amounts, I got this from Alistair MacLeod, who is a very, very well regarded financial market analyst, but he's also a former banker. So what he said was that the Eurodollar market, the size of the Eurodollar market is about $10 trillion. The monetary base of the United States is about $6 trillion. So that implies that the City of London is in control of a bigger amount of US dollars circulating around the world than is the United States and the Federal Reserve Bank. That's the implication of that. So that then the following is that the only way to destroy this beast is to crash the dollar completely, because that is how they have the power over everyone. So now
there's so much fear about the SCO, the BRICS, because the global South doesn't have cash, but they've got lots of resources.
Yes.
You mentioned the $10 trillion. Then think about how that's leveraged upwards. Think about the global derivatives transactions on a daily basis. We talked about this last time, I think, the repo markets, how the Federal Reserve was able to, if necessary, spend tens of billions of dollars overnight to cover bad debt. So on the one hand, you've got a system that could blow out at any moment. You could have a mistake made or a default, which could trigger the demand for cash to cover the bloated paper on record. And that's what the City of London has. They're controlling that. And they control it in a number of ways, but it's also, this is where the offshore markets come in. This is where drug money laundering, weapons money laundering, organized crime as a whole. It's a lot of money that's actually cash as opposed to financial instruments. And so the City of London controls the financial instruments. And as long as they have the central banks working with them, I think you're right. The question is, will that ever be called? How long can you kick the can down the road without having the obligations called in?
Well, judging by how confident and smug they are acting these days, I think they're very close to the end of that road, because they're obviously not at ease. They're obviously, this purchase of TikTok, this is almost a panic move.
Yeah.
This happened all of a sudden, and it was $300 some million. I don't know what it was. Did I get that right? Was it?
I don't know.
I think that's right.
Yeah. It feels to me like that. Well, I think it's clear that they're very panicked. And so I think that their whole agenda is on the verge of collapsing. But then, another implication of all this, because if, let's say, that this big power in the city of London is so fanatically and unwaveringly committed to the Zionist project, then I think we can pretty much narrow down the list of suspects. The recipients of the Balfour Declaration, who I think were planning to create a one world global monarchy with the seat of power in Jerusalem and installing one of their own as the king. I think that's if I were an investigator assigned to this case, that will be top of my list for enhanced interrogations.
And you know what you're looking at with that, the so-called British Israelites. And this goes back to, what was his name, Prince Edward, who set up the Palestine Exploration Fund in the 1860s to scout places to build castles in the Middle East as part of the control of a global network. But if you think about it, you're also dealing with people who are not all there. It's a cult. The British Israelites, the idea that Jesus impregnated Mary Magdalene, one of the stories. And so his child fled to Spain, I think it was, and there's a line of direct line to Jesus in the British monarchy or the European oligarchy. A lot of this, when you talk about the Freemasonic orders and things of that sort, these are people who have a view of themselves, an arrogant view of themselves, as better, genetically better, smarter, and more entitled to the luxuries of life. And this is where eugenics comes from. It's really, when you said going down the rabbit hole, it's a really slippery slope. And this is where we've seen this before. This is what created fascism in the 20th century. I would add one other thing. The reason I bring Ukraine into this is that Ukraine represents, for that same grouping, the same capability of Israel. That is, people you don't care about, that you're willing to send to their death to disrupt Russia. And the problem they have with China is they don't have a Ukraine to launch against China. The people of Taiwan don't really want a war. So, they're stuck holding on to the Ukraine card and the Zionist card as two of the major disruptors of the whole emergence of the BRICS and the global South.
Okay. I just got this conversation is darker than the ones that we normally have.
Well, yes and no, because this has been with us for centuries now. And the fact that we know about it, I think, is a positive one, is a positive fact. And I think I have to mention again my investigative report on Theranos, because that's another big thing where Larry Ellison was involved. Not only was he involved, he was one of the key financial backers.
Oh, really?
Yes, and he was the mentor to Elizabeth Holmes. And the board of directors were the who's who of the American deep state. Henry Kissinger,
George
Shultz, Admiral Gary Roughead, Sam Nunn, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, General Mad Dog Mattis. Not a one person from the health sector. All people close to the intelligence services and the Pentagon and the military industrial complex. And they even hired these power lawyers to intimidate anybody who would speak up, anybody who asked too many questions. And it was very, very heavy-handed. And Rupert Murdoch was heavily invested in, I think he invested about $125 million into Theranos. And they mobilized the whole media apparatus, Because then in 2014 and 2015, Elizabeth Holmes was everywhere. Everywhere. She was on the cover of practically every wide circulation magazine. She was booked on every TV show. They were presented her as this kind-hearted, super capable genius, the first female self-made billionaire, the next Steve Jobs, only with a kind heart. Literally, I'm not inventing these things. And then the whole thing collapsed into its footprint. So it went from $9 billion valuation to zero, all because 5 very ordinary individuals, 3 of them employees. Well, 2 of them were employees. One of them was the widow of an employee who couldn't take the pressure and finally committed suicide. And 1 journalist and 1, investor and family friend of the Holmeses. These 5 people brought the whole thing crumbling down into nothing because they knew the truth and they wouldn't keep quiet. And so the fact that we're learning these truths and that the 5 of us are not keeping quiet, the 3 of us plus,
Plus both viewers.
Yeah, is correct. And all 4 of your fans.
That's right.
I think that this fact is actually the candle in the darkness. And it doesn't matter how dark the darkness is. If there's a candle there, if there's a light, if there's a source of light, it can't extinguish it. So that's why I regardless of everything, I feel actually quite optimistic for the fact that we are learning these things and we're understanding the predicament.
Well, this question of awareness is really important, because if you can keep a population profiled around identity politics, that the Muslims are the problem, or the Jews are the problem, or the blacks are the problem, or the undocumented are the problem, you can control the situation.
Yeah.
What happens when people start figuring out that they're being played? And that's starting to happen around the Kirk question. I'm not someone who would say Charlie Kirk was a great hero, but he did something that was quite interesting, which is he did encourage real discussion. And that's what they wanted to shut down. Now, if you look at what's going on in the world, you have the leaders of a number of global South nations who are not afraid to speak out right now and are working on big projects like the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that was just completed. Extremely important for East Africa. There's the bioceanic transport between the Atlantic and the Pacific in South America, a way of increasing the integration of nations and the connectivity. Then you see the demonstrations taking place on Palestine. They're growing. And the collapse of the establishment parties. So that's the brightness of the sun starting to shine.
And the big flotilla?
Yeah. And so, I see my job is trying to make sure that light gets brighter and reaches more people.
Yes, that's all our jobs. And both people who are watching this video, please press the like and make a flattering comment about Alex or Harley, right? So we know you're there. Thank you. Okay, well, just on that, I see what I think is certainly what's brewing in the UK is gang versus counter gang. How the British are favoring or seem to be favoring Muslims and migrants, and then seem to be favoring or disfavoring Christians and white people and indigenous English people and Scottish and Welsh. A tactic that they used successfully in India, where the Muslims were in a minority, they favored the Muslims, and then the Hindus turned on the Muslims. Where the Hindus were in a minority, they favored the Hindus, and then the Muslims turned on the Hindus. Gang versus counter gang, the ants in a jar, Alex, that you've spoken about, getting shaken up. And I imagine it's the same playing out in Europe.
Oh, on that count, I have some interesting news from Bosnia. Yes, and so this is interesting because the last year or two, the tensions in Bosnia were rising very, very dangerously. But now I've heard from one Croatian politician and one Serbian politician who have both testified that since Donald Trump administration took over, that the situation has improved dramatically, and that they are no longer antagonizing the Serbs, and that they are no longer, the provocations against Croatia have died down a lot, and that apparently there's an undersecretary of state or a deputy something who is in charge of the Balkans. And both this Croatian politician and the Serbian politicians have said that the man, I forget his name now, the man is very, very competent and understands the situation with great clarity. And that they both had meetings. This Croatian guy actually flew to Washington, D.C., sat down with them. He thought that he was going to have to show them where Bosnia was on the map, and he was shocked that this guy knew about everything about the situation. And that's a very, very positive sign, because Bosnia was supposed to be erupting into the second front against Russia. So that I literally learned this in the last few weeks. And so that's a very positive thing.
That is a positive thing, which brings us neatly to Ukraine and Trump's recent pronouncements that he's going to supply Ukraine with long-range missiles and give them permission to go and bomb deep into Russian territory.
But wait, Rich, did he actually say this, or is this just the talk around town? Because I didn't hear him say it. I didn't even hear Keith Kellogg say that.
I think it was Zelensky who said it.
Yeah, but
okay. Well, that we can take to the bank.
No, he never lies. He's the paragon of virtue and integrity, self-sacrificing.
But you see, this is part of the fight going on between Trump and Europe. Because on the one hand, he's saying Europe should do what they want to do. If you want to shoot down Russian planes, go ahead. You want to give long-range missiles to Ukraine, go ahead. Buy them from us. Now, on the other hand, the Europeans initially, when Trump said that, were cheering. And then they started to realize that when Ukraine ultimately falls, the person who will be blamed will be Starmer, Merz, and Macron. And so it's a no-win situation for Europe. Now, is that Trump's 5D checkers or chess? Or is that just an offshoot of Trump putting out some ideas? I mean, I don't know, but I think the Ukraine situation still is extremely dangerous, because if they get this 150 billion or 140 billion of seized Russian assets, it not only replenishes their ability to buy weapons and maybe buy some soldiers, but it also establishes a precedent that there's no longer any rules in international finance. Yeah. And I think that's an important consideration, because there are a lot of bankers who are very nervous about it.
Well, just answering what you said, Alex, I was listening to the Duran today, and they were saying about how Trump is ready to give missiles and everything. And I don't know what their sources are. I don't always agree with their analysis, but I think, I do value what they say. And I think they do great research. I'm not sure they've got the right take on this time, because the other thing that I wonder is by Trump saying, okay, go ahead, do what you want, he's destroying the European Union, and he's allowing Putin to destroy NATO.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Well, I listened to Alexander Christoforou and Alexander Mercouris, and like you, I hold them in highest regards. I follow them all the time, and I get great value from there. But I think that this one they got wrong, because I did listen to J.D. Vance's speech about this, and I did listen to what Donald Trump said about this, and I even listened to what Keith Kellogg had to say about this. None of them said, "Oh yes, we're authorizing long-range missiles, and we're going to provide." Even Keith Kellogg shrunk from saying this. What he said is, "Oh yes, well, the way I read Trump's basically social media posts and his statements, I think," and then he went into some non-answer answer that didn't really say that, yes, we're going to provide all this to Ukraine. The whole thing is a big psyop game. And I didn't find anywhere that any official of the Trump administration actually explicitly said, yes, we made this decision and we're going to do that. We have Trump's very sarcastic post. We have J.D. Vance's word salad that kind of tries to put Trump's sarcastic post into a more eloquent, more articulate form. But again, no substance that would be a game changer. And you have Keith Kellogg doing the same. And then you have Zelensky, who is like lying the second he opens his mouth. You know, this whole business of them having conquered territory and taken so many square kilometers and putting Russians on the run and all this. Well, it turns out that comes out of his head. You know, it's not really happening. More likely the opposite is happening.
He's under the influence of something.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that people kind of jump to the conclusion that this is a done deal when it's not even a done deal by a long shot. And then, you know, the Tomahawk missiles really are a massive game changer, not in the sense that they can change the strategic situation, that they can reverse Ukraine's loss. It makes the United States a co-belligerent at that point.
Yeah.
And so that would be extremely dangerous for the United States to do. So anybody with a shred of reason with them wouldn't do that. And then second, Tomahawk missiles they're not something that you can just load on a truck and put it in a container and then ship it to Ukraine with an instruction manual. You have to build launchers, right? And that's a major undertaking. You know, it took them pretty much forever to build one in Romania and then another one in Poland. And so this is not going to, you know, like they're not going to just bring their like a mortar machine there and pour some cement together and then stick the thing inside. This is a big installation, and it's complex, and it would require a lot of American engineers to come over there. And even among the NATO countries outside of Ukraine, right? There's only 2 nations that have Tomahawk missiles, and that's Spain and it's Holland. The Brits don't have it, the Germans don't have it, the French don't have it, the Italians don't have it, and so forth. And so, for some reason, I don't know why, the Spaniards and the Dutch have it, and then the third one would be the bronze medal would go to Ukraine. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Not only would it make the United States a co-belligerent, potentially making themselves target for nuclear retaliation, but they still couldn't win the war. It still wouldn't change the strategic defeat of Ukraine. So, to my mind, this is merely a psyop. And the psyop, go ahead.
Today, the Pentagon sort of poured cold water on the Tomahawk missile question by saying that they're not readily available. They brought up the points you were making, that they require a lot of training. They wouldn't be available till the middle of next year. So I'll tell you where some of this talk is coming from, though. It's coming from people in Germany, because Merz continues to flirt with the idea of providing the Taurus missiles. There's his government is collapsing, and they're trying to come up with a raison d'etre for him being chancellor. And he stands there with Macron and Starmer as a kingmaker, but people in Germany look at him as a clown. And so I think the other thing we have to factor in here is the collapse of the establishment parties in all of Europe. There are very few of these parties that have any standing. The one party that has a standing is Fidesz and Orban. Mm. And he just delivered a real shock to the EU when he said they're not going to allow taking away the one nation's right to veto. That's a big fight going on right now. But the German situation is fascinating to watch, because now there's talk that Merz is going to try and win over some of the AfD, after he said that the AfD are a bunch of Nazi fascists and the worst tradition in Germany. And now he's appealing to some of them to try and come over to him.
I think he might win them over, maybe if he promised that he's going to crack down on illegal immigration.
And follow it through, because he did promise that.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, you can't get fooled again.
Very good, very good. Your political hero, George W. Bush. I always knew that, Alex. So tell us about Germany. Why do you say that the government's collapsing? Not that I'm questioning you, but I am questioning you, but I'm curious. What's going on?
Well, Meritz's rating is under 10% as a personal rating now.
Less than Starmer's, it would appear.
That may seem strong compared to Starmer and Macron, but if you look at the CDU, the Christian Democrats, there's a great deal of unhappiness because he got rid of the debt brake. He's talking about hundreds of billions in spending on arms. When you have bridges that are collapsing, you have the train system doesn't function. They're trying to rebuild the train system so that they can send troops by train to Lithuania. But inside Germany right now, there's higher cancellation rates than ever. This is the pride of Germany, the Pünktlichkeit, being efficient. And you see the same thing happening with the car sector, the auto sector. And there's just a ruling from I think the European Union Court that's going to end up shutting down the use of diesel cars completely. So, Volkswagen was doing everything they could to retrofit cars so they could be acceptable. Now even those won't be able to be allowed. They're talking really about banning the diesel car in Germany. And so you have a stunned population, and immigration is still a pretty big issue. But there are other issues there that are people not being able to afford food. The housing situation is terrible. In Berlin, you can't find an apartment. And they're talking about this idea of mandating that people who have space in their homes would take in migrants. If you do that, you're going to blow the whole situation sky high. So, and Meritz is talking about, well, we can sell bonds. Who's going to buy the bonds? So it's a collapsing situation, which is probably the reason it's so important is that Germany has been the motor of the European Union.
Yeah, the European Union ain't going to see through this end of this decade. There's no way. No way. Completely collapsing. And there was an article today in Zero Hedge about steel and the importance of steel production. And I don't know if Germany has any steel production. It certainly doesn't have cheap energy. But you can't build weaponry without steel and without cheap energy. You're going to buy it off China with what?
Yes, but you can make it out of plastic that identifies as steel. It's good enough. It's just as good.
But you can inscribe values on it on the side of plastic, right? You can etch it easily on plastic. Okay.
Or political messages.
Yes, like equality and diversity. Diversity is our strength. Okay. Any commentary on France and the UK from either of you?
I don't know if I have a whole lot to say about France. It's obviously in the similar mess as everywhere else, as particularly Germany and Britain. But at the moment, it feels quiet. And I think that the French government themselves are aware of just how precarious their position is. So, they make some statements in support of the Palestinian people, and then they recognize the Palestinian state. And it seems to me that they're trying to patch it up to pacify the grievances a little bit. But then at the same time, they don't miss a chance to aggravate Russia and to exacerbate things and make things worse for the future. And so I don't know where that's going. And then Britain, well, you're sitting there. I don't get the impression that things are going well there. I have a friend who just told me that he started working in London after maybe 10 years of not working there. And he said that things are worse now in these last 10 years. That was you.
Yeah, much, much worse. I don't like going into London. Way more rundown. And I noticed, now as an immigrant myself, I wasn't born here. I brought up here, schooled here. I was here since I was 5. I just noticed the number of new arrivals, migrants, legal and illegal. And I was looking at some figures the other day, and according to official government figures, over 900,000. There were over 900,000 immigrants in the UK last year. That's
900,000 just in 1 year.
just in 1 year, and I can't remember the figures for 2023 and 2022. But this is when the economy is not expanding. So resources aren't growing, wealth isn't increasing. So then you have more and more people coming in, competing for a shrinking pile of share of resources. And then that's a recipe for conflict. And then what the government does is then tread on local people by calling them racists and whatever, right? And shutting down speech, free speech. I saw a clip, the black belt barrister, he does some really, really great analysis. He's a barrister, and he did a clip on how 2 police officers were they gave this young Bible preacher a community warning, which meant that he couldn't preach the Bible. And he's saying quite rightly, listen, I listen to the word of God, to the word of Jesus Christ. I don't care if you arrest me and put me in prison. I'm not going to shut up about Jesus Christ. I just think it's completely, because what it was is that somebody took offense. Now, from what I'm getting through social media is that's not happening when it comes to Muslims praying or Muslims proselytizing in the street. And it's not like the government cares about any Abrahamic tradition. They're just playing them off against each other.
Yeah.
Right. But you know what I also saw? There was this guy who was kind of trolling the pro-Palestinian demonstration, and you see, like the police are, escorting the pro-Palestinian demonstrators out. They're arresting them, right? And he's literally going to police with their camera, and he was saying, "I support genocide. I support Israel. Death to like he was saying these things. Are you going to arrest me if I say these things?" And the police are, "No, sir. You have the freedom of expression." But in the same place, at the same time, they're arresting all these pro-Palestinians. But you see, this is such a dangerous game that they're playing, because what happens? So they brought all this mass of people, obviously with the view of pitting them one against the other, right? So they introduced a lot of red ants into an environment of black ants. What if the ants figure it out and they say, "Hey, they're playing us,"
Yeah,
and then they turn on them? That's a very dangerous game that they're playing. And, who knows? Obviously, you have Tommy Robinson there, who's doing his utmost to turn the Christians and the local population against the Muslims. But, like if you look at the commentary under his posts, he's, people are not quite buying it. A lot of people are not buying it.
yeah.
It's coming out that he gets money from the Zionist lobby.
Yeah, I mean,
yes, and it's $7,000 per post now. So,
well, he may be getting more. He may be getting more, right?
Maybe getting more, yeah.
If he's getting any, but he's definitely come out and said, "I'm a Zionist," after what happened in the Manchester synagogue, where this guy killed. I don't know. I didn't watch the news too much about it. Killed a number of Jewish worshippers in a synagogue.
There were two people killed, plus the attacker. But one of the women who was killed was shot by police.
Yeah. Now, I do suspect a false flag. I don't have anything to go on. I don't have any evidence. I suspect a false flag. The guy's name was Jihadi, and he attacks a synagogue on Yom Kippur.
A little too obvious.
And he probably left his Quran in the car, right?
That's right. And then he's shot dead. So then, well, why did you shoot him? Could you not have tasered him or captured him or sat it out, denied him food and water until he surrendered, and then we get intel from him and this whole vast network? No, we shoot him. And I saw a clip on X or whatever where it's going on, and just passers by just walking past, just while all this is going on. No, all too easy. And then obviously, the answer is, and I do need you to provide these details. It's digital ID to keep us safe. So Alex, Harley, could you please hold your brick cards up so I can verify them and verify that you really are allowed to be on this show?
Well, I'm sitting in Monaco, so I wasn't able to procure one yet.
And I'm relying on you for protection.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh! Oh, the digital IDs. Hopefully that'll shake even more people up. And I do appreciate what you've said in the past, Alex, about how bad governments are at major IT projects.
Yeah. But also, Rich, I remember back when jihadi terrorism was in vogue in France, which was, I think, about 10 years ago, maybe before, maybe during the war in Syria. And then you had those jihadi terrorists, obviously, driving trucks into crowds of people. And then there were attacks on churches. And then there was a beheading of some worshippers or a priest, I forget. And so there was like a period of time when all of these terror attacks were happening, obviously all perpetrated by fanatical jihadis. But then, the whole jihadi thing just went out of fashion. And then the terrorists just disappeared. They didn't do anything. It looks like they all went on vacation for about 10 years. And now they're back. And they're burning churches. And we know that it's them, because who else would it be? So, people, without hesitation, oh, look, a church is burning, duh, obviously it's a jihadi terrorist. Who else would it be? Except that these church burnings have been going on forever. And when they didn't burn them, they brought demolition equipment and they demolished them. And it's happening all over Europe. It's a very, very weird thing that's going on.
It is very weird, and it is the imperial elites stoking conflict between the groups.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Yes.
In Iran, Jews and Christians are free to worship. In Pakistan, Jews and Christians are free to worship. I don't know if there are many Jews in Pakistan, but I know there are churches near, the families where I live, where my families live in Pakistan. I've been to visit them, walk past churches. Every now and then something will happen, and the government stomps on it, because for Muslims, Jesus is a prophet. We believe they can come. For Muslims, Musa is a prophet. Ibrahim is a prophet. So
yes, of course, and Muslims revere Virgin Mary.
Yes,
and Islamic eschatology is the end of times. There at the end times, they expect the second coming of who? Of Jesus Christ. So they revere Jesus Christ. They respect Christianity, and they don't burn Christian church. Like if you go to Egypt, well, actually, if you go to any Muslim countries, other than, unless it's run by Al-Qaeda or Al-Nusra.
MI6 proxies.
Or other MI6 proxies.
Like Boko Haram in Nigeria.
Yeah, we have to be inclusive here, yes. But you'll see on the same street, you'll see a mosque, and then you'll see a church. And if you look at the skyline, it's like mosque, church, and that's just a normal thing. And when at Christmas time, the Christians put up Christmas trees in public places, nothing happens to them. This whole clash between Islam and Christianity is purely an artifact of the imperial cabal, who just want to pit us to fight amongst each other, while they impose their control matrix on all of us and impose a totalitarian rule.
If I could bring up something that you just reminded me of, the fact that these terrorists do the job and then disappear. Two examples of that: the Aldo Moro kidnapping, which they blamed on the Red Brigade, supposedly leftists, after there'd been right-wing terror in Italy. And the whole attack on Moro was to stop Moro from moving for a policy of détente with the Soviet Union. He'd been the former prime minister. He was kidnapped, held incommunicado for 55 days, and then found in the trunk of a car. And as soon as that happened, the Red Brigades disappeared again. A case I just discovered today, I was looking at the today's German Unity Day, the 35th anniversary of the unification of Germany. And one of the things that happened there was a fight. Should Germany become an investor in Russia, a partner with Russia, or maintain a distance. The old British keep Germany and Russia apart. And one of the people who wanted to invest in Russia was Alfred Herrhausen, the chairman of Deutsche Bank. And he was murdered. He was hit by a very sophisticated explosive device. They immediately blamed the Rote Armee Fraktion, the Red Army faction, the Baader-Meinhof second generation. They brought them to trial. There was no evidence, and they dropped the charges, and they disappeared. This is NATO. This is the establishment, Operation Gladio. And that's fairly easy to use that to intimidate people, to terrify them, or to get them to fight someone who should be their ally.
Very good. Thank you. Which is why, Alex, it's so important that people share this video. Both of the viewers share this video far and wide and spread the word. And we have to unite. We have to unite with each other, with our neighbors, with others in our community against our elite overlords, the one who wants to destroy our lifestyles, destroy any reverence that we may have for God and Jesus and Moses and Abraham and the Holy Prophet Muhammad and their message. I just want to share something personal. So I married a Christian. My older brother's married to a Jewish woman, and there were no issues with our family, none whatsoever, about him marrying a Jewish woman and me marrying a Christian woman. They were like, "Oh, they are Katabi, they are people of the book." So, okay, thank you so much, Alex. Thank you so much, Harley. I love talking to you. I get so much out of it. For those of you watching, please, if you found this valuable, please do share this. Please comment. Please like. Follow Harley. Follow Alex. And look forward to doing this again in a month's time. This is Rich, Harley, and Alex signing out.
Thank you.
My wife and I have been happily married for over 25 years. However, there's no stopping the march of time and the slow, steady decline in testosterone level. Luckily, I've discovered a natural, safe herbal formula that boosts testosterone levels. My wife and I are still happily married, but she now complains that I'm being a bit of a nuisance. You too can be a nuisance by boosting your testosterone levels naturally. Go to bit.ly/CryptoRichBoost and boost your testosterone levels today.